Thank you, Mr. Satyamurthy, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen here. In fact, he's been very generous in speaking so good about me. I'm not that good. Like to err is human. I do have my own failings, but certainly this is one subject which is pretty much close to all of us. I shouldn't be saying that to me alone, because all of you are here. Very fact that presupposes that how you very sincerely, from the core of your heart, believe in this particular topic. Before this particular meeting, of course, I had no idea about the existence of Anti-Corruption Academy. In fact, though I was aware of the International Academy in Vienna, but didn't know. And in fact, it was Mr. Satyamurthy who, in course of some professional engagement, met me, and I got to know. And then day before yesterday, in fact, he called up that I'm starting this particular one. Would you be able to spare some time and all? So I did come yesterday. I met Nyayamurthy, Justice Pasayat. Before that, I had met Satyamurthy. So Satya, Naya, and all, they are all very good cardinal core principles for any moment to happen. And it was wonderful listening to some of them, including CVC. And I'm quite grateful to the founder. 2015, he started this academy, and it's a very wonderful initiative on that. And before we start, I mean, I'm not going to speak on any particular aspect of it, because in general, I will share my thoughts on this topic and a little bit about my background. I'm associated with that. In fact, I started my professional career as an officer in the Reserve Bank of India, and as a regulatory bank in course of the 4 years that I spent, mostly of course in the banking and the foreign exchange department, is to as a regulator inspect the banks and see where the compliance level is, and that was pretty good learning experience for me. And then I joined the Indian Revenue Service, and being the indirect tax department of the government of India, had the opportunity to work in the customs department, where primarily it deals with the import, export, and the enforcement regulation pertaining to anti-smuggling. And then the central excise, which primarily again on production and manufacture tax in India, which then used to be both indirect taxes, contribute about 70% of the revenue that we all use for the normal development in India. And while working with customs, I got an opportunity, thanks to the Supreme Court of India, which wanted, that's again something which probably came out of initiatives like you people, that need to have people from different background as a part of the Central Bureau of Investigation. And that's how the rules were amended to take Indian Revenue Service, Customs and Income Tax officers as Superintendent of Police and up to DIG of Police. And I worked 6 years. Now, world is so small, and you never know when your knowledge and experience comes handy. When I left Reserve Bank of India, I thought probably my banking is over. And but then when I joined CBI, then Director Mr. Joginder Singh, he's no more, he asked me, where would you like to be posted? I said, anywhere. I have no specific preference. And he posted me in charge of the famous Jain Hawala case then. And very next morning, I read the newspaper that the head of Hawala investigation is threatened with a transfer to Guwahati. Little did I know that my first day would start with a controversy there, because it seems there was a Supreme Court monitored directive that those who associated with Jain Hawala case shouldn't be transferred without Supreme Court's permission. Now, why I'm narrating this, because these are all different threads in the moment, that when you want to have impartial investigation and a court monitored very closely into the corruption cases and all, there has to be some propriety. So when that happened, the very next day he called me. He said, where else would you like to go, and what's your background? I said, I'm from customs. I worked in Reserve Bank. Then he said, would you like to work in the bank fraud cell, we call Bank Securities and Fraud Cell in CBI? So I said, most welcome, I mean, any place. And that's the time when you all must have heard about the famous Harshad Mehta scam. And it followed in years to come with Ketan Mehta, when the famous Indian Bank scam and various other scams which happened. And I was privileged to supervise the investigation of some of the security scam cases, some of the bank fraud cases, and also supervise at the prosecution level. In fact, when I left CBI, the only case which ended in conviction in Harshad Mehta case was the one which was supervised to me by me at that stage, so that I was very lucky with that. And yesterday, in fact, Justice Pasayat was here, and we had a common thread because he was the judge in the Supreme Court who delivered after closing of the hearing, almost after 1 year of it, though I was critical that after you close the hearing, why should it take 1 year to deliver the judgment? But better late than never, the judgment came and he was convicted. And of course, the different kind of justice took him, Harshad Mehta, out of this world. So most of these cases were abated, being a person who no more, not given any chance to defend himself. Now that case and many other cases did in fact agitate my mind about the entire criminal justice system that prevails then and even now no better as well. Though we have traveled along over the years in making many changes, bringing out many initiatives. I did on my own initiative, took off a research study of the cases of bank fraud in trial in various courts in India. And the revelations were very startling. The oldest case under trial was 35 years. Then, I'm talking about 2002 or 2001 to be very precise. And the cases, though we have in CBI, specialized courts for anti-corruption cases, in spite of that, we had an average time of 6 years for framing of charges, which is pretty bad. And on an average, the dates which used to be given to the accused persons or for any particular case trial was twice a year. So those are the kind of incentives. Why we say when you talk of economic offense, it's a very low risk and high incentive, because when you indulge in that, you get hugely benefited in terms of economic gains to the person, but in terms of the risk, it is the fact of being in jail, maybe for a max period of 3 months. That is what if you are prepared for, and after that the trial goes on, and if in the trial, one of the rarest cases being 35 years and average framing of charge being 6 years, you can imagine how many years it will take to conclude, and after that you have the appellate fora of High Court and Supreme Court, where the lawyers, I'm told some of the lawyers are present here, so they do take advantage of the various shortcomings in the entire system and drag on the cases for years. So end of it, we really don't get back anything except trial by media and the process of visiting the courts, paying some money to the lawyers and all, which mostly is proceeds of crime, because whatever they had got, they have to sell out that, and that probably meets the end of justice for that. Now, but again, this particular example I'm citing is primarily that in economic offense cases, is it really worth only punishing and putting behind, or should we also secure the money? Because I distinctly remember that time Harshad Mehta had made an offer to then Prime Minister that give me some time, I would pay back the entire money. And those who are familiar with the security scam or the stock exchange, like economy, it's a circle which moves on. You take money, put into the shares, artificially inflate in the market, then at the right time you sell out, make a profit, and again put into shares which carry very low one and create a heat for that particular product or market or company, and then again hits up, and then you make profit, get out of it. So the cycle that goes on. The moment that is stopped, the entire cycle comes to a standstill, and that's what happened. So he was too sure, because in the process, when he didn't have money, he in fact approached many of the banks and the financial institutions, and I'm told a large number of participants here are from the banks and FIs as well. Now, the money which was the lying idle with the banks, both nationalized as well as the private sector banks, those are the banks, they used to mostly invest in government securities. And government securities then, even now, didn't carry much more than 3 to 4%, which is absolutely nothing. And the real income which used to come back was primarily from the loan part, which they used to sell out to different commercial and business establishments. Now, this was a mandatory requirement as a part of the SLR and the CRR to part with some money with the government securities and bonds, which are very low yielding. Now, there comes a maverick like Harshad Mehta who goes and approaches. He said, look, how much you are getting? 3%, 4%? I'll give you 10%, 12%. Are you game? So they were pretty thrilled and excited about the whole thing. And that's how he took their money, invested in the share market, and then got the entire profit out of it and paid back in time. And that's how the cycle moved on, and there was confidence and trust, and money was taken out, paid back, and money taken out and paid back and all. It's finally when the bubble burst, then by then the exposure of the banks and FIs was so much that all of them had to lose. And what was there to get back? As bankers, you all know, you need securities, you need collateral and otherwise. And those days, the SOPs were not as strong as they are currently. So most of the securities were those equity shares or bonds and things of that nature. And the paperwork was pretty shoddy, and it was not absolutely the way it should be. As a result, they had nothing to fall back upon, because the so-called share value which was in the market suddenly fell down, and the banks couldn't take any timely measure to encash that in the market. As a result, most of them lost huge amount of money. Now, this is one example by way of sharing with you that the major milestones in the entire financial system of the country in terms of the crime was the security scam and the few scams that followed, which are primarily of the same nature. The years that followed by, I got to see that the another common thread is that when people, particularly the business community, when they approach the banks and they come out with very, very encouraging product, the future, they come out with project reports which speak only of profit, and those are very nicely prepared by some of the chartered accountants, very eminent firms and all. And I'm not casting any aspersion to the community, but what I want to say, I haven't come across any loan proposal where the chartered accountant or the person who prepared the project has said it would end in losses. Always it had a time on. From day one, it may be, there would be some negative one. Then first year, second year, you break even. And third year or fourth year onwards, then you start making profit. And they show you the sky as the limit and fortune all the time, all the way for everyone in the process. So all the project reports are always very, very promising in terms of the product, be it the goods or the services or the sector that they represent. And that is the starting point on which a banker starts his own assessment. I have seen 99.9% cases, the bankers copy the things which are mentioned by the project person into their own proposal when they move. Here is a proposal from X, and this is how it would work, and end of it, the bank would make a profit. And then they take collateral security, that is the next one, and there comes again another problem. There are valuers of property who again very, very unscrupulous in doing a proper valuation, and they inflate it multifold, sometimes twice, thrice, 10 times. So effectively that's not a reflection of the market, but that's a collateral security which is taken and the advances are given. Now when you give that, in the process you have, depending on the amount involved, starting from the branch, it goes up to the higher ups, which are the board of directors in the bank, headed by the chairman and managing director. Now quite often it's a two-way process. The small time loans, it starts and ends with the branch manager, maybe with his blessing, collusion, or ignorance in three varieties of ways. But quite often, and the big mega fraud that we talk of, are primarily the requests come from the top that you process and give it. Now the poor fellow who's in charge of loan processing, he is restrained and has a huge constraint of giving a fair assessment of what he really feels about the project. Because end of it, it is his career. He may be transferred. He may have a bad annual appraisal report which would stall his promotion, and many others which every bureaucrat is scared of. And because of that, he is perforce puts up a proposal against his own wish, own wisdom, recommending that. And it travels up. And there again, another anomaly which we found, that the so-called board of directors in the banks, most of the directors, they are effectively sleeping directors. It is the CMD who normally rules the roost, and he decides if he is okay, the loans are sanctioned. We have many nominee directors, many independent directors, including government nominee directors, who absolutely play no role at the time of discussion on any particular big loan projects. Now, these are the some of the findings which I experienced personally of small cases, big cases, and those big scams and all that. Now, this over a period of time has led to a lot of new requirements in the banking and financial institution field in terms of better KYC, better reporting. You have suspicious transaction reports, you have currency transaction reports, and you have annual information reports, all that flowing, and over the period, there's a huge automation which has taken place. So there's in terms of information, in terms of data, the data analytics has come in place, which is pretty good. But at the same time, what is ailing the industry is the fact of the target which is given to a bank officer. He has a target of disbursing loans. At the same time, he has a target of getting deposits. Now, getting deposits fine because money is coming in. But when he has a target of giving loans, and those who would be taking loans, all those big fellows, and most of them bully them, and sometimes small freebies they give to become friendly and all. But by and large, it is they who can lift that kind of money from the bank, which would give you that satisfaction that you have achieved your target. And with that target, people quite often, if you see over a period of time, the kind of SOPs which have evolved, and certainly I would take this opportunity to request the Academy to even look at the instructions which are there for sanction of loans. And they are, in a way, theoretically, very nice framework, very good, very exhaustive, but is it really realistic? Now, when you put 100 odd points to be seen before money is given, now not a single money can be loaned out to anyone. Now, if there is a pressure, either for his own career to achieve the target or pressure from the top, he has to definitely make good and give way to some of the conditions which are required to be. Now, the moment that happens, even if one particular point has not been complied with and loan is sanctioned, and after that, for a few years, probably there would be repayment of capital, interest, and after that, many of the cases, it's beyond the control of the person who took loan to really ensure that this particular project takes off, because we are in a world, we are connected to the entire international community in a manner. If your thing is dependent on, let's say, aviation turbine fuel, then your entire industry, which is aviation industry, would be very badly affected. In fact, I had investigated some of the cases of East-West Airlines, Damania Airlines, and many of them. And if you find, there are many which are systemic in nature, because aviation industry per se is pretty risky. But because of open sky policy of the government then, a lot of private sectors got into the sector. They had very little experience in that, but huge exposure was given by the banks, and then they went on. And in the process, I have seen East-West Airlines and Damania, where a lot of free tickets have been given to politicians, to bureaucrats, and to many others. And naturally, when this industry is competitive, where normal ticketing is difficult, your aviation turbine fuel and other expenses going up, you really find it very tough to continue with your business. Now, with that, if you have to give you freebies, just because that time the license control system was pretty much in the peak, and you have to palm off every once just to ensure that you really run your business properly, then naturally it will be ailing. But once it becomes a problem, once you stop repaying your thing, then again the similar factor, how a banker behaves and how that loanee really behaves. Now he would make a request that give me some money so that I will use that money to pay back my interest. Now what happens, many of you being banker would know, when it completely written off kind of loan, the bank has to in fact make provisions 100% towards that written off part of it. Now there are different stages in which an account becomes NPA. Now at the very beginning, when the banker would be interested not to make it NPA because it affects their profit in long run, and number two, it is a way out and some workout that some other account, some other advance, some other purpose money is given, and that money is utilized to next that there is a provisioning, and you delay the process. But these are, it's like currently what we have, oxygen and some kind of life support system which is given to a patient, and beyond a point, if someone is on a ventilator, it's a question of time. After that you decide to pull it off and the person is no more, and it really happens that way. And you want to take off that time, they try seeing the collateral securities, they find highly overrated, some of them are non-existent, some of them are bogus documents, some of them are signed by employees, some of the companies have been created by their own employees, their drivers and all, who are the directors of the company. There was one case which I was investigating in Mumbai. There, one particular company, we are talking about shell companies currently, but even those days, 15 years back, they're quite rampant in some sectors, particularly in Mumbai and all. And one fellow had created many companies by persons who were terminally ill and undergoing cancer treatment in Mumbai, because they knew pretty well that after a few months or maybe a year or later, all of them would die, and after that naturally the liability of any crime wouldn't be there, and they were made the directors, and they were made as in their names accounts were opened, and money used to be siphoned off and all. So now when you see, one is a genuine business failure, second one is because of circumstances beyond your control, you are not able to handle that, then you find ways and means which later on they get into trap of any police or CBI investigation, because there are plenty of ingredients which satisfy various provisions of the IPC and all. And so any banker in the entire chain, starting from the lowest till the up, is a very with due regard to my senior colleagues from CBI who are present here, it's a very popular section 120B, the criminal conspiracy. So A1, the accused one, entered into a criminal conspiracy with sometimes maybe 10, 15, 20 and all that, and all of them, because of the kind of evidence which come up, they end up in conviction and the case. Now because of this particular nature of banking and financial institutions, there was a hot debate then when Mr. Vittal was the CVC. The debate was between a bona fide commercial decision and a mala fide criminal intention. And the fine line is so difficult to decipher that in the context at that particular moment, a banker decided that yes, it's in the interest of the bank that I need to infuse a little more money to ensure. The way Government of India is doing to Air India, the way yesterday you would have heard Government of India is thinking of pumping into a few lakh crores into the economy, because when it goes down, sometimes you put money to ensure that probably it's like oxygen or some other life kind support might come out of it. And that's how sometimes out of genuine, the requirement, they do expose, but then that becomes a little difficult to sustain later. And because as you know, all the police officers, or for that matter, any enforcement officer can't be expected to be an expert in every field. So that's why they set up at that time a bank advisory board, which was headed by a former deputy governor of Reserve Bank of India, that before any case is taken up by CBI, because that time the threshold was any case more than 5 crore was only to be taken up by CBI, the BSNFC branch. And before any mega cases are taken up, that board used to look into the various aspects and recommend whether this is a fit case to be taken up for criminal investigation or not. And that was a kind of support which was given to the banking community. The way the other general public servants in the government, particularly Joint Secretary and above, and other public servants, like be it under the Section 19 of the Prevention of Corruption Act or 197 of the CRPC, some kind of comfort is given that if a public servant is doing due diligence, is doing his job in the normal course of his work with good faith and bona fide intention, then he should be protected. You can't hang everyone. If you do that, then no honest officer would take any risk and there would not be any development. Now, coming to the core part of the skill upgradation, yesterday when I was here, because you think of prevention of corruption, combating corruption, then we think of skill development. Now this is a theme, skill enhancement. So that presupposes that all those participants here are necessary skill, but they need to enhance. Now, what is that? There is a motley of background. If people come from banks to auditors to lawyers and whatnot. So there can't be any one solution which will fit in. But as a generic theme, as you know, we have progressed not only in India, in the entire world. The banking sector is almost 100% fully automated. In that, there's a huge data, and the technology keeps changing. And with that, we need to use automation in a big way and put in place a risk management system. If you want to prevent something, then you need to have the red flags well in time before it really goes out of your hands. Now, in the customs, as you know that millions of containers of cargo come day in, day out, both in export and import, and all the containers are not supposed to be opened, because if you do that, then one port can handle only a few hundred containers, and goods also will be destroyed or affected or tampered. So because of that, we had to put in place a system called risk management system in customs. So all the documents which are filed for import or export are processed against risk parameters, and then we decide which is the one which is to be given a green channel clearance, direct port delivery, which is the one which is to be taken up for a reassessment, which is the one which is to be taken up for examination, which is the one to be taken up for scanning by the X-ray scanners or the gamma scanners that we have. So that way we try to minimize the risk. It's not a complete risk management, because as you know, it's very difficult to really handle such a huge cargo. 90% of our consignments, they go out of the ports without any assessment, reassessment and examination. And then we had to put in place a post-clearance audit, because if you allow 90%, then you can imagine what's the kind of risk to the economy and to the security could be. So post-clearance, that means you don't do examination in the port area to that will get clogged, and then your turnaround time will be impacted, and your economy will be coming to a standstill. So then once the goods are shifted to the factory or the premises, you take up on again document-based post-clearance audit and all, which is again fully automated. Same is the case with passengers. As you know that we have about 60 million international passengers coming in, and T3 International Airport is one where every 2 minutes a flight takes off or anything. To manage such a huge traffic is very difficult to know. So we have put in place by Indian Customs something called Advanced Passenger Information System. So before any passenger lands in any of our ports, we have complete detail about those persons, and against the risk parameters, we do come to a conclusion whether he is to be given a green channel or red channel, examined, kept in surveillance, or to be arrested or anything. So the long and short, that risk management system is a core requirement for any organization if you want to really prevent before something happens on that. So that is something which probably you need to. The second aspect is on a legal aspect. As you know, the corruption in India primarily addressed in two ways. One is the administrative measure, where you have the various chief vigilance officers and ethics officers and those compliance officers. They try to see from an administrative point of view, and any deviation, violation, non-compliance is addressed administratively. Either the person is removed, his promotion stopped, or delayed, whichever way you try to address that, which is not a very, very effective deterrent. But the other one is the prosecutorial, and the prosecutorial one, where you talk of under the Prevention of Corruption Act and the other criminal statutes that you have, you move, and that is the domain of the police. And India is, as you know, is a union of states, but with federal features, and with kind of three lists that you have: the union, state, and the concurrent. Police is a state subject. Now the various states have their own anti-corruption bureaus, but the number is definitely not proportionate to the kind of fraud which happens, and there is a huge deficit in terms of the skill and probably the economic offense wings of the various state police over the years been trying to upgrade, automate, but a lot needs to be done, and that's probably one area when you talk of skill enhancement. Parallelly, probably ACA could think of skill development for that sector, because that is only the agency which can really make a big impact in terms of the prosecutorial address of the particular system. The second, we don't have any federal crime per se in India, unlike in US and all. So the Central Bureau of Investigation, which had a rich history. Yesterday Justice Pasayat mentioned about that why with independence we started the new act. In fact, it was way back in 1941 when the Special Police Establishment was set up as a part of the War Department to address primarily the defense purchases and all. And then in 46, the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act was set up. And CBI, in fact, doesn't have a separate act of its own. It was by an executive order of the Ministry of Home Affairs on 1st of April, 63 that was set up. But as you know, since police is a state subject and there is no federal crime, CBI cannot suo moto take up cases unless there is a consent from the state government. And it operates primarily on two different kinds of consent. One is a blanket mandate given, let's say, by state of Odisha can say that all kinds of cases under the PC Act can be taken up by CBI without any case-to-case basis of consent. But there are states where they say you can only do cases where the central government employees are involved, where central government interests are involved, and if there are any private people as a part of the conspiracy, you can do that. And some states like Karnataka at point of time, they were saying no, there is no conditional, no blanket, it is case to case. And some states like Goa at one point of time, they withdrew total consent. So CBI cannot make any case and all. So effectively, CBI works on a borrowed mandate. Now, that being the case, they are handicapped, because the moment you talk of corruption, people look up to CBI as the agency which has a rich history, successful rate of conviction, and one which has a major impact on this particular sector. But it has its own limitation. So probably as a policy change, whether ACA could think of, is India ready for enactment of a federal crime in sectors like terrorism, in sectors like corruption, and sectors which affect the entire fabric of the country. Now, recently you all have heard about GST, and GST was a major game changer, because earlier, as per the Constitution, on the sale of goods, it was the state government which had the empowerment to impose VAT. And on services, it was the central government which were empowered to impose service tax. States were not empowered. And on the goods, the central government was empowered on production and manufacture, but not on sale. For the first time, a real cooperative federalism happened by amending the Constitution in introducing new GST, by which both the center and the states are empowered to impose tax on goods which are produced and manufactured and supplied. So they both are at a level playing field. So if this could happen in taxation, this certainly could happen in the field of crime. So this debate of having some federal crime particularly always comes up the moment there is a terrorist attack. But any development and any real impact on the country would happen only when you tackle the corruption. Otherwise, the money that is hard-earned money which is collected by the direct and indirect tax of the government, that if a major part is spent on development and the middlemen knock off a lot of it, then it doesn't reach the desired people for whom it is meant for. So this is why if you want to have GST's logo, one nation, one tax, and one market, then you also need to have a similar kind of enactment in the constitution and make both the central as well as the state forces equally empowered to do it. And this is where it comes cross-empowerment. In some fora, I have also mentioned that police alone cannot certainly do that. In the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, there is a cross-empowerment where the police, the customs, excise, Narcotics Control Bureau, all have been empowered to investigate cases and book. Similarly, the Customs Act also, we have empowered many border agencies like BSF, ITBP, Coast Guard and all. And the time has come that we should not work in silo and let there be more empowerment and more so, and the corruption from the perception index that we all talk of, we all are familiar with. There are few departments where propensity to indulge in corruption is pretty high, and we need to identify those internally rather than depending on the index of the Transparency International, because time has come. Let's have our Euro pollution standards, Bharat standards. Let's have our own perception index, because otherwise transparency, I'm not critical of them, it's a pretty noble initiative to at least rate countries, but how scientific is that, how realistic is that? It depends on the people they ask, what kind of questionnaire is there, what stage they ask, what their individual, those who participate in that, their own experience may not determine the realistic environment of 1.odd billion country that you have. Probably ACA could think of as some other project of starting our own corruption index, both of bribe payers, bribe acceptors, and the perception that we have. And once we have that, then probably we can think, because normally people know the tax department and some of those who handle revenue, supplies and all, there's a huge propensity. Now customs, income tax, we are all empowered to undertake investigations in our respective laws. And corruption is one field where there is a highly record-based, highly systematic way of laundering money, layering money, where we have the expertise. And could there be a discussion of empowering PC Act to such of those departments, at least in respect of cases which are affecting their own officers? So that could make at least a major dent, so that there could be more such people to be brought to the books. Now this is something which is the second theme. And the third one, again at a policy and a micro level, Mr. Satyamurthy, you have a little time?
Oh yeah.
I was making a comparison between the UN Convention Against Corruption and the Indian anti-corruption laws that we have. Starting from 1860 Indian Penal Code, where bribe and corruption amongst the public servants was an IPC offense, and later on we had the special enactment of the PC Act. But the fact is, Indian legal system is primarily aimed at public servant-centric anti-corruption legislation. Because though any private fellow who's in aiding, abetting, or a part of the criminal conspiracy certainly can be booked under the PC Act, but the fact is our thrust is against the public servant. But India is growing in leaps and bounds. There's a huge private sector which has come up in a big way, and corruption is very rampant in private as well. Now, my own personal experience, some of them have said they were supplying prawns from, Odisha, prawns and crabs from seafood used to be there. They used to supply to some of the 5-star hotels in Delhi. They said, it's a perishable item where time is very critical for me. And the moment I say the person beverage in charge, he says, unless you pay this much, I'm not going to approve it. And if you don't approve it, it's rejected, it's a total loss. So he has to, pay him. So the goods and services supply in charge in the private sector do indulge in a lot of corruption as well. And there is no such remedy. When you talk of corruption as a concept, it comes out of the value system. If you want to really attack it, we need to address the value system. And the value system stems from two. One, the very beginning, when someone is starting his life in the school and the family, is to catch them young and make them feel that he should not, even if he dies, would not take money from anyone else, any illegal gratification. And if that is something which many of us, from our own religion that we follow, or own parents, if they have said, some of those lines, they are so deeply ingrained. And probably that is one area we need to have a mass movement that catch them young, because as you know, less than 40 years youth in India is a huge number. And most of us actually become very wise when you grow old. And but then let's make an impact by making them wise when they are just starting to learn the final ropes of life. And that will, in fact, be very, very rewarding. Yesterday my son was asking, when we were crossing the road opposite Nehru Park, there is a green light. But then the cars, they don't stop there. He said, why is it so? That, in every field we are so non-compliant. I said, it could be the value system, but not that Indians don't like to comply. When the Indians go abroad, they do comply 100%, rather more than others maybe. And you see the Gulf countries where you don't find a single construction where Indian workers are not there. And but you see the way the quality comes up, you see the cleanliness in the city, and in spite of government's thrust area being Swachh Bharat, even now you look around, you find everywhere there is some litter or something, and nothing to do with the education, nothing to do with a class from which the people come. Someone driving a Merc or Audi will throw up suddenly from out of his car anything, as you're thinking that probably the whole thing is a garbage. This, why are we doing? Why are this? So that means on the one hand, this 1.odd billion population, we 70% maybe are very religious. Every religion has its own day to follow, and they go to the temple, mosque or church. They do fasting, they do this and all that. So we are in a way very conformist. We do comply. Then why is that we are not doing on this? So that is what, because that same attitude all of us are grown with, chalta hai, nothing will happen. So every system would work if you have both incentives as well as the punitive measures. Now the punitive measures in a red light area, you'll first have a red light at the traffic. People don't stop. Then you write below, stop at red light. That doesn't stop. Then you put a cop over there. Then also they would see, does he have a bike to follow? If not, then you also go. So that means you are so ingrained that in case you are caught, okay, I'll palm off something to that guy and go off. That means you can escape. And that is why when you talk of the needy and the greedy, there are two segments in the field of corruption. Those who are sitting on the fence, they have a need, and we need to address through policy measures. A poor peon, a class 4 person in Delhi has to buy the same vegetable from the same market at the same price that a millionaire would be buying. But then he doesn't have a house, he doesn't have a transport of his own, but he has to spend 10 hours in the office and work. He has a family to look after. Now there is a need component. If there is an opportunity, then he falls prey to it. And that number is a huge number. And we need to address such fence sitters who are really in doubt, should I step into here or there? And we need to address to see that step back, don't jump to the other one. And the greedy ones are the ones where we have to be absolutely with iron hands, very punitive. Some of the countries do have death sentence, like in China for corruption. I'm not proposing death sentence, but the measures should be such that it's a lesson, is a deterrent which is effective, and for to learn for others that name and shame, we should not shy away. What may be the consequence? There is absolutely no privacy of someone who has this. Now, being a developing country, since a lot of money is going in and out, we need to, in our legal system, have something called repatriation of assets. Now, UN Convention Against Corruption has a provision where assets which are stolen from a country can be brought back to the country from where they're stolen. And this kind of provision we don't have. So this, in a way, gives to extraterritorial jurisdiction in those countries who have completely imbibed not only the Unkar in letter but in spirit as well. And though we have ratified in 2011, there are a large number of provisions in Unkar which we are yet to be translated to our legal domain. As I mentioned, ours is a public, servant-centric legislation, whereas Unkar talks about corruption in private as well. So we need to make a comprehensive legislation. Like Unkar, it talks about prevention and combating. We are talking mostly of combating, not preventing. So prevention part also has to be brought into the legislative one, which primarily is an administrative measure currently. Various organizations have their integrity officer, compliance officer. They try to do from that point of view. So we need to bring that a semblance of seriousness by putting into the legal field. Unkar again, very strongly talks about civil society participation, and that is where probably organizations like ACA have come, and they are doing great work in enlisting support from various segments. And while there is a need for such specialized workshops to enhance the skill, but there is also a huge requirement to go into the basics of sensitizing people and building skill, and then for some, those who need enhance, those who need, you build that. Now to the the end, I would let me share that basically again they are writing be the change. I really liked it because in the context of corruption, Mahatma Gandhi had said there is enough in this world to satisfy the need of the people, but not the greed. So, and he also said, if you want to see the change, be the change. So ACA, this private initiative, has not expected government, CBI or the police or Lokpal or Lokayukt to come and address. They have taken upon themselves this particular initiative, which is very noble, to ensure that we spread the message and we make our society not only physically swachh, but internally in our mind, in every respect, a truly clean country. India, with so much of difficulty, again, Transparency International, if I go back, because that's the only index which is available, currently there is no country which has 10 out of 10, because there is a scale of 0 to 10. Denmark, New Zealand and all, they remain at 90. So that they were 90, 91, they come back to 89 rather, and average worldwide is below 43. So in a scale of 100, if the average global perception is below 43, that means it's very, very endemic, and it's very, very universal. And India has nudged only from 38, it has gone to 40, but miles to go. So, but then we need to really touch base with countries where they have at the top, like Denmark, Finland, New Zealand and all. So probably this could be another project for you, that what is that they have and what is that we don't have. And the way Government of India is trying very hard that World Bank's ease of doing business index, India's ranking has to improve. So here, till you have our own Desi Indian perception index, relying on transparencies and seeing what are the measures that those countries have followed, by which they are able to maintain at the top the rung of the ladder, and what we need to do, and very effectively work on that. Since the Prime Minister always invites ideas for his radio program called Man Ki Baat, probably ACA could give at one point of time corruption as a theme for him, and what needs to be done, and a very, very prescriptive, very, very crystal, very, very action-oriented suggestions, so that that hits his attention. And once his attention is taken to a particular one, you know that the entire country, India as well as abroad, are totally up on that particular subject. He mentioned about Khadi, and suddenly you find the sales of Khadi went leaps and bounds and all. So there is a need of approaching various sources. And last not but the least, we need to use the social networking tools very strongly to spread the message. Probably you can have, I don't know if you have a Twitter handle, the Prime Minister has about 2 crore followers, and there are many, even Amitabh Bachchan has 1 point some odd crores. And when you spread the message, when you copy them, prefixed by a dot, so your message would reach to all his followers. So with one single stroke, you are reaching out crores and crores. Even if you may not have so many followers, but by prefixing a dot before their Twitter handle address, you are reaching out to a large number. And that's how you can spread out. when Mahatma Gandhi started civil disobedience or the freedom struggle, there was not even a proper newspaper which to reach. But now we have such a powerful tool, the entire world is in our hand and the palm, and probably if we can't use that, no one else. And you all are so intelligent, you are so educated, you are so skilled, and you have seen the whole world. Probably time has come for a big change, a big bang approach, rather than a very incremental slow one. We need to have both, but in a big bang if you go, certainly there will be a lot more improvement. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Yes, sir. Can we have a mic over there?
Yeah.
I think I'll be comfortable.
Yeah, we do have. Now we do have special courts, and again, though a government servant, I'm here speaking in my private capacity. So we had for the security scam a special court called TOTS, and these 4 years, not a single case was concluded the trial. And what is the parameter? The person's passports have been seized. They have to go abroad. They file an application for return of passport. 2-3 hearings on that. Then order, okay, your passport is given. When you come back, deposit with CBI. So like that, hundreds of hearings, hundreds of such petitions were taken up. So even after having a special court for a very special purpose, the results were nil. I'm sorry to say that. So if there is a will, it can happen. And there have been some judges, some magistrates, even if they are not specialized, they are given so much importance and their rate is very high. The accountability has to come. And it's not number, it's the quality. Nowadays, you see, he asked me to share experience. In customs, we have adjudicating authorities, we have appellate authorities. We have a target that per month a commissioner appeals has to dispose of so many cases. And those disposal are not table disposal. They are not this kind of miscellaneous petitions disposal. There has to be case has to be adjudicated. Now, unfortunately, in the court, same thing is happening. The number of disposal, you have mass loka adalats, all they take up very 138 NI Act cases. They take up the traffic accident cases. They take up some of the family matter cases. So the number is huge. Every big national loka adalat, you hear at the end of it, so many thousands of cases were disposed of. But how many of those are murder? How many of them are corruption? How many of them are scams and all? So when you talk of a target, again, it has to be a balanced target. Because every crime is also important in some way or other. A person who has lost his father, mother, wife in a murder is also equally eager that the person is booked. Now after so many years in Arushi case, what happened? Someone is acquitted, but who has done it? Not known. And how painful it must be for the families, those who are affected by that. So corruption is again another one, but in the priority, while special courts are not the only solution, but accountability has to be there. And that accountability, even a normal general court also can deliver if they are accountable properly and the citizens and others are watching it.
ACA
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, India has made a lot of, taken a lot of initiatives. You have the e-procurement portal, which has been mandatory, and recently government has made mandatory government e-market. It's called GEM, and you all would have heard about the old department, which was a British department of DGS&D. Every purchase by the government has to be as per their rate contract or through them. Now that department is closed. Now everything is through government's e-market portal, GEM portal, which is mandatory. So these are the two where for any procurement in bidding process, which has become very transparent, where since I have very closely personally used e-procurement portal, I know that date on time on which you have to open your technical bid, the financial bid, all that you can't open before or do anything. So there is so transparent in that. Now number two, there is a integrity pact which from the World Bank, which was now CVC made it as one of the mandatory requirement. So based on that integrity pact, the bidders also they sign. Now when you talk of the ethical index, unfortunately many of the companies you really don't have a very transparent mechanism to know how ethically where they stand, because there are large number of countries, in spite of best efforts of FATF, some of those tax haven countries, the bank secrecy laws are so strict, they would not disclose anything, even if there are cases against them. So how do you really come out with the ethics of standards of those companies? Another thing is in India also, there are again a lot of debate about the naming and shaming. Now, mere fact, if something is NPA, if you moment to do it, whether it is NPA out of genuine business reasons or fraudulent ones. So that again another risk on that. So there is nothing which is worldwide accepted in a very transparent, objective manner of ethical standard. But people do, again, social media coming back. One of the Indian companies who's bidding in a major way project in another country, which has a major environmental impact, and those countries, they are writing back to India, what are the cases against this particular group and all that kind of stuff. So that connectivity would always ensure that even if something is not on the government records or the government doesn't want to share that, but the fact would be that would make the civil society up in arms against that. So probably that's why this vigilant civil society can work really wonders. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. In my personal capacity, I worked with CVC of India in 2010, and I'm delighted because that was the same time 2011 ratification was due. So in 2010, there were two initiatives. We were preparing internally for the Unkar ratification, and I worked and drafted the national anti-corruption strategy. So all the points what you talk about today, private sector corruption, repatriation, international cooperation, these were all introduced, and it's just that the strategy now needs to be taken to the next level in terms of implementation. And this was fully endorsed by all the donors, by the private sector. So it was a wide Ministry of Law and Justice approved it as well. So this is, I would really urge ACA to take it up at CVC. This document is there on CVC website, but implementation should be taken forward.
Thank you very much.
And yesterday CII also referred to this and
Yes.
said that they will offer cooperation.
Indeed.
Yes.
And CIA, everyone was part of this whole initiative.
Yes. So we should take it
Yeah.
forward. I think
So I think someone, you raise your hands.
Sir, do you want to ask him one more question?
I would like to raise one question. The point you said about your son when you on the traffic lights, and he said, why do people get away? Why do they break it? India is a soft state. India remains a soft state. Guru Amitya wrote a book in the 60s when he pointed this out. We don't implement our laws. You try breaking such a law in America or the West, you'll be fined within seconds. Down the line, this is a right. Why do we remain a soft state? Because the 30 or 20% on the top are able to use the system to get away with it. And therefore that percolates. Unless we become hard and harsh state like the Americans or the West, this thing will continue all the time.
Thank you very much. In fact, there's the automated solution for that in London. Because of pollution, again, the central London, they had fixed a higher entry fee. Now, it's very difficult to deploy so many police people at the borders, those who cross into the central one. So they had fitted cameras, would automatically capture the number, and there is a data system on that. End of it, they would say how many times this particular one had come, and what is the amount, and that is what goes into directly to that particular person's, and then money is paid. So you don't need a traffic police who may indulge in corruption by letting off or anything and all. There is a lot of solution by which we can really enforce laws non-intrusive way, in a more effective way and a more transparent way, where it would be in the interest of everyone, win-win for all. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. May I request Mr. Satyamurthy to say words?
Delegates, guests, friends, and my dear friend, Mr. Devi Prasad. It is a revelation to me today that you are not only an efficient administrator, but an articulate speaker. You have generated a lot of interest. And I was telling Mr. Umar that the audience is spellbound. That shows you are an articulate speaker. I'm happy you are not a part of ACA yet. You know why? You have given us a chain of suggestions. If I were to take each one of them, which will make a jewel for ACA, but then we will be constantly on our toes, and this group is not enough. I think you can you are used to this customs department where you can drive 600 people. How many suggestions you have given? One was on federal law, right? So many things you have given. Each one should have a group of experts, and we will have. But anyway, we are going to take it seriously. We are even thinking that we will make your speech into a booklet, which can be the ACA Bible for the next 3 years. I thought, how did you make your speech so comprehensive? When you said about needy and greedy, there are two divides, the economic divide that you mentioned. So, and then you were compassionate enough to exonerate the needy sitting on the fence. That shows your human touch. In greedy, you mentioned, and even for bankers, I must say, since yesterday the bankers in this group are agitated, this morning somebody walked up to me and said, why are bankers targeted in this conference? Who said that? You said that, right? But did you hear Mr. Devi Prasad's speech? He said two things. One, before you give a loan, there are 100 questions. Even if one is not ticked, loan cannot be given. But that cannot be the banker's role. He said how much you are being pressurized. Otherwise, your promotion may not go through. I thought he will mention the famous case in SBI. I don't know how many of you know about Talwar Amendment. You sent it to me, Mr. Naveen? Yes, sir. You sent it to me. How many of you know about Talwar Amendment? 1, 2. Right. I'll share it for general benefit. Talwar was the chair. You know it, Mr. Devi Prasad?
He was at advisory board chairman and the deputy governor.
Yes. And what happened to him? He refused. The most powerful man India has seen to bend the rules. Yesterday people talked about collaterals. He was asked to take collateral in a particular loan and then extend the loan. When he refused, finance minister called him, conveyed the desire of the government. When he refused, he said, this is not within the rules. They amended the State Bank of India Act to remove him. To that extent, pressure can go in this country. So, another interesting aspect which Mr. Devi Prasad touched upon, is it for a growing economy, is punishment of an industrialist is important, or growth? So that is the micro individual and macro economy. How do you balance this? And at times, you will have to overlook to serve the economy. Right, I can go on and on, but you must all realize Devi Prasad has shared his official time. Today is a working day, and it was indeed nice of him to share with us his ideas, perceptions, suggestions, and a sort of, see, he is one of us. He makes us feel he is one of us. Thanks a lot, Mr. Devi.
May I request Mr. Satyamurthy to present Mr. Dash with the memento? Mr. Umar Siddiqui will present him with the memento. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Mr. Dash. What a brilliant, encompassing speech. In such a short time as that too. Cohesive and coherent. Exceptionally well said. Exceptionally well said.